I have the honor of introducing to you our President and Professor Gerard Pillay. Dear President Gerard, IofC Canada warmly welcomes you, and we are delighted to have you with us today. President Gerard Pillay was born in South Africa, where he grew up under apartheid. He holds dual citizenship of the UK and New Zealand. Gerard earned a Doctor of Philosophy degree from Rhodes University and a Doctor of Theology degree from the University of Durban. After lecturing at the University of Durban, Westville, he became Professor of Ecclesiastical History at the University of South Africa in Pretoria in 1988. He is widely published as part of a distinguished academic career, examining such topics as the relationship between the church and state, the complex interplay between theology and human sciences, as well as seeking to understand how religion can both move with the times, yet still stay grounded in tradition and history. Pillay was the Vice Chancellor of Liverpool Hope University in the United Kingdom from 2003 until the end of December 2022, and responsible for the organization, direction, and management of the university and staff. Apart from his academic achievements, Gerard is a man of deep faith and has great capacity to listen and care for people. I know a friend of mine who had some critical questions regarding IofC reached out to him. In spite of his busy schedules, he had a Zoom meeting with her, answered her questions, cleared her doubts, and gave peace of mind. This is what Frank Bookman did too. I have also remarked in every speech that he gives, he brings out the spiritual component and the essence of initiatives of change. He says, what would the pioneers of this movement say if they were here today? I suspect that they would urge us to do something, to be vanguard of change makers, to help with the healing of history and continue the work of reconciliation, to be the honest brokers in addressing the predicament in which we find ourselves. Without any further delay, I pass on the word to our President, Gerard Pillay. Welcome, Gerard.
Well, thank you so much, Mangalam, for that very kind introduction. And thank you, one and all, for giving me a few minutes. It's a joy to be here and to share with you at this important time a few thoughts. It is an important time for Canada. It's 80 years of your founding and 90 years, as our colleague just mentioned, since Frank Bookman was made a brother of the local people. These are wonderful times, and I know that you are going to have to make big decisions today. I won't join you for that part. I'd like to give you the privacy to have good discussions about all that and to wait on God's guidance so that whatever you decide will be for the benefit of our society and the glory of God, and that all that we do will be ultimately not for ourselves and our own benefits, but for the benefits of Canada. The world is in great need, dear friends, and you know that better than I. Anyone who takes even a cursory look at the headlines know that this is an important time for the world. The world is out of joint. And our own lives, and certainly our movement, echoes all that sense of disjointedness. But we must take heart that we are on the side of the angels, that we are not alone. And I'd like to ask you, as my dear friends in Canada, not to be dismayed and not to let circumstances take away our joy. Because what you're experiencing in Canada is experienced in other parts of the movement globally. It's not unique to you. But also, what we are experiencing as a movement is experienced now by all voluntary societies all over the world. Movements such as the Lions Club, the Rotary Club, all of these that are based on volunteer work are declining membership, less and less interest from the young. And so while we may bemoan our circumstances, let us be mindful that this is the way that many volunteer societies, certainly all the ones I know, are experiencing exactly the same anxieties. But my first message to you is that do not be dismayed. Find in these times of change something that will make a mark for our children and our grandchildren, something that will leave a legacy so that we must never be called the selfish generation. Especially those of us who are the baby boomers have had it quite good in the Western world. And we must think about our stewardship of the movement for the future. When I became president a couple of years ago, one of the first questions a very dear friend of mine asked us, but she said, "What is our mission?" And I thought, well, coming from the university world, I'm used to, in many universities I've served in, having whole meetings whereby people talked about mission and purpose and values. We people are full-time facilitators of these discussions, where we sit in circles and have sticky posters, and we think about our mission and we try to work out what our strategies are. And my friends, I can't tell you how many times after days and days of this kind of seances, mission statements are written and then nobody reads them. They're put on all over the place on the websites and such like, but nobody takes it very seriously. When I became president, I went back to the preamble of our Constitution. And I found that it's one of the most insightful, well-written preambles. I hope that you will go back and read it carefully. I know many of you do. Because in the preamble, it is stated very clearly what our mission is. It says that the mission of Initiative Change is to strengthen the moral and spiritual foundations of society. There it is in one line. To strengthen the moral and spiritual foundations of society. That's our mission. And I was saying to a group of friends at Cole, during the war years, when Frank Bookman and his friends conceived of a name, they looked around them and they saw that after the war, Europe was rearming, believing that if they rearmed, they'll stop war. But Bookman and his friends realized that no amount of armaments, no amount of military strength will stop war. And they realized that it's not rearmament that's needed, but moral rearmament. And so they came upon this name, moral rearmament, where the emphasis was moved from armament tomorrow. Now, we've since then, for a range of reasons, changed our name to Initiatives of Change. And I'm afraid sometimes we think that the initiatives we do is what keeps us going as a movement. Remember, we are initiatives not for the initiatives part, but the emphasis is on the change. We do take part in initiatives, but the point of the initiatives, all of them, must be change. And what is this change we want? The change is to strengthen the moral and spiritual foundations of our society. A society that is overrun by materialism. Bookman writes about this, he spoke about this. Materialism, he saw, was the death of society. And we need to replace this by moral and spiritual underpinnings. And of course, the methodology is simple, but it is an ongoing call for us to struggle. And what is the methodology? The methodology is very simple. We can change society if we change ourselves. And if people change, then changed people can call the world to an alternative way of living, an alternative way of thinking, an alternative way of governing our societies. But it begins with change. And you know that famous saying of Gandhi that we repeat often in our movement: we have to be the change we seek in the world. And remember, friends, MRA didn't start in the big conference halls in or with big programs. It began with homes, in homes, with house groups, long before it established wonderful facilities and had great conferences. It was a movement of individuals gathering in homes and inviting people to come and listen and consider another way of living. I was talking in this vein, and a leader from Africa said to me, "But Gerald, you know, we don't even have the money to have an office where we can establish something. We don't have the money to have an executive director." I didn't want to be rude, but as he was speaking, I thought to myself, why do we need an office? Why do we need an executive director? Because a few better endowed Western countries have them. Is that how we're going to design the way we're going to live in the future as a movement? None of those accoutrements are necessary if we get back to what we are called as a movement to do. Be the change we seek in the world. Begin social and public change by first changing ourselves. And you know the four absolutes. It's not for me to repeat them. You know them well. But knowing them, dear friends, is a call to live them. Because if we really lived unselfishly, honestly, lived with pure intentions and motives, purity, and we lived lovingly, the world will change because we change. And I was talking to a group of people, and somebody said that one of the things you know, she likes to be remembered for is to be an honest person and to speak her mind and so on. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful. But if we speak our minds without purity of motive, and if we speak our minds honestly without love, it is better to be silent and not to speak. But a lot of things we think we are self-righteous and right about actually causes a lot of harm and discouragement to other people. So the job begins, our job begins by absolute unselfishness. An unselfing self is a very, very difficult process. So it is important for our societies, not just for our movement, that we take what we preach seriously. Whatever structures you decide on, whatever ways you are guided into living out this mission, let's be faithful to what we are called to do. Moral rearming, initiatives of change, not just initiatives for initiative's sake. We can be very, very, very busy people with wonderful initiatives, and yet we won't be strengthening the moral and spiritual foundations of society. But the initiative would be great. But then there are many NGOs that do all of that even better than we do, with more resources. So as your brother and as your friend, let's, in your discussions, go back to what we are called to be faithful to. Remember that we are called to help strengthen the moral, spiritual foundation of society. Keep saying that until it becomes clear to us in our quiet times. Ask ourselves, how am I contributing to that? And before saying anything, let's see that we ourselves have harnessed this uncontrollable self that we all live with. That whatever we say is full of love, coming out of a clear and pure motive, and that we live the purity we want others to live. I was talking to a colleague just the other day, and we were talking about what is the meaning of quiet time. And very often quiet time is the time when we all think of nice and interesting thoughts to share with others. No, quiet time is a time to be quiet before God for those of us who have a faith. And those who don't have a faith are welcome to join us when they try to listen deeply within themselves and seek guidance. That is part of the unselfing that we have to be very, very busy with. And so I wish you, my dear friends, God's wisdom and guidance, that whatever you decide at this meeting, that you will be sure that is there. It will lead to establishing in Canada something that will keep this torch lit, not just for our times, our children, and for their children. Thank you very much. God be with you.
Thank you, Gerard, for your inspiring words. You said, "We are not alone. Do not be dismayed, to take heart." And you have once again proved to us how to live the IFC values and also how to strengthen the moral and spiritual foundation of society.
Jack, would you like to unmute and speak?
Yes, I was very grateful for what Dr. Pillay said in his comments today, that about the emphasis on personal change, because as Gandhi and Bookman always said, if you want to have a part in changing the world, the place is to start with yourself. And that was the beginning for me, and I think for most of us who got involved with IofC. And it's not easy always to know how to begin that, to pass that on, but I was grateful for that emphasis. And just to say that the purpose statement of IofC Canada has specifically mentioned in it, and their purpose is to promote us to the preamble of the International IofC organization, which was mentioned by Dr. Pillay. And I think it's worth looking at that purpose statement for IofC Canada regularly and see how we can carry it out. Thanks very much.
Any other questions? Yes, Catherine.
Yeah, I liked the fact that he's looking ahead in the future, that our generation today, we who have joined IFC, have to think about the value of this organization for the future of our children and grandchildren. And I was thinking about that myself, because I have a grandson and I really want him to have these values. And I have a question. What do you think? Because we need God's wisdom, you told us. We need at least to have God's wisdom and guidance. What do you think we need to choose now as our focus to achieve that?
Well, that's a big question, and it's I'm sure we are asking that question in different contexts. The kinds of things we have to do, say, in India, may be slightly different from what we have to do in Britain. But we have a commonality, and the human predicament is the same, whether it's in the north or south or east or west. And the human predicament, as Adam's children, we all share the same anxieties about our fallenness, our will to live to our best potential, being made in the image of God. I think, Catherine, if I may call you by your first name, I think, but this is my bias as an educator, I think that the outreach to schools and to universities is a very important outreach to the young and to the teachers of the young. We have a program in India which you may well consider in Canada, and we're going to showcase some of its work when we meet as an international fellowship in Panchgani in January. And I hope that Canada will have a strong contingent. I know Brother Lewis Cardinal was with us at CO, and my colleague Tembi on the International Council. I hope that both of them will join us in India, because we want to build we don't want to have a Eurocentric mission. And that's why meeting in Africa and meeting in Asia, meeting in the Americas is equally important to meeting in Europe. We have to have not a Eurocentric or an Anglo-American centric, or a European centric. We need a polycentric movement so that we cover the globe. Remember, Frank Bookman didn't establish the mission to change Britain or America. From the very beginning, it was to change the world. So the global dimension of our work was there as a seed right at the beginning. We have to think globally. And the way to do that is to be strong locally. Some people call it glocally, where the local and the global come together. So each of us in our countries is a part of the whole, and we are not entire to ourselves. How to work globally and not just think about ourselves nationally. For instance, how can Canada and America work together to strengthen our members in South America? And we find that when we are reaching out to others, we ourselves get stronger. When we become cloistered and inward-looking and nationally focused, we become weaker. Frank Bookman understood that. But I would really think the outreach to schools and to teachers and our professors at universities is a crucial way through them to reach tens of thousands of people. I know it is more glamorous to reach out to politicians and to befriend prime ministers and presidents. It's a different world to the world that Frank Bookman lived. It's makes the headlines when you do that. But I don't think our Lord wants us to make the headlines. Our work is to change the course of history, to have a global mission, and we don't have to be part of the story. Because this is not our work, it's God's work. So sometimes when I think, well, what are we achieving? Why aren't we making the front pages? Why aren't we be able to change senates and the way elections are run and have an impact on the Middle East? And well, I still think that's the way of thinking that is more katasarka, as Paul would say, according to the flesh, but not according to the spirit. Our job is to be servants of the world, where we are hidden and God's will is done. And that's a very different approach to the approach some would like us to take. We're not the United Nations or the, International Red Cross. That's not our mission. Our mission, we've always been a grassroots movement where ordinary people make a big difference. And that's what we need to return to, another way of thinking. The business schools at the universities are now talking about servant leadership. All of them teach their students about servant leadership. But servant leadership comes from the gospel, where he who had divinity lays it aside and becomes a servant of no repute. That's the kind of countercultural thinking our movement can give the world. So where do we start? Well, I'll leave it to you where you start in Canada. But just to remind ourselves, Canada is part of the world, an important part of the world community. And if Canada is strong, the world will be stronger. And if the movement is strong, then Canada will be stronger. We're not an island entire to ourselves.